One of the things that the at least the Brexiteers would always sort of complain about, especially post-Brexit, and of course, it's the free market fundamentalists that are obsessed with this, is the idea that the blob, the wokerati, the the civil service, the deep state, you name it, they are what's wrong with the country. Not their policies or anything like that. Oh no, no, no. They're fine. That's the correct right thing to do. What they insist on and have insisted consistently since Brexit is that we need to shrink the size of the state. This is the continuous mantra they keep on singing. Not only just these conservatives, but Nigel Farage as well. Reform UK, if you've ever seen any of their candidates, constantly talk about reducing the size of the state. Now, of course, we've said what you should do every single time one of these people says this. You need to press them on this. You need to say to them, well, hold on, shrinking the size of the state means that the government can no longer perform certain functions or perform them as well. So, what is it exactly you are going to get rid of? What departments are you either going to shrink or get rid of entirely? That's what you should always press them on when you hear someone say something like that. I, in the past, have been very, very pro expanding the state. I think it's not a bad idea. To do. And I think, expanding the HMRC would be a fantastic idea because it's the only civil service department that, brings in money. And of course, the more people in HMRC we get, the more tax revenue you can bring in or chase after people who, well, don't pay the taxes, which ultimately tends to be, rich people. But like I say, that's something we've discussed before. But I want to talk about this because this came out today from RTE that said, we are not coping with Brexit. And why are we not coping? Because we do not have enough civil servants to deal with all the extra stuff that we had to take on when we left the European Union. And once again, something we said in 2016, when we leave the European Union, are you going to replicate these departments? Are you going to properly fund these regulatory bodies? The answer was, oh, yes, we're going to do all that. But of course, since 2016, we have hired 100,000 extra civil servants. Don't get me wrong, a lot of civil servants, but it's still not enough. Why? Because they refuse to fund properly these bodies. And of course, to enlarge the departments, which are desperately needed enlarging. Not only that, we've talked before about the lack of knowledge in some cases of these civil servants. This is why you have to pay advisors, and then these advisors charge stupid, ridiculous fees. If you had someone in government who actually knew about railways, if you actually had a proper governmental railway department, things might not be as particular bad. That's an area example that we should, I think, have. But then of course, I'm not in government. But let's get over this because this is once again yet another problem area that is going to cause significant problems as always. And of course, Brexit is just never done. Doesn't matter about the referendum in 2016, doesn't matter that we left in 2020. Brexit is just the gift that keeps on giving. So we go over into this. So before we do go into that, please remember to click on the like, the share button, subscribe if you are new to the channel, and of course, down below in the doobly-doos, we've got the Patreon page, the One Off Nation link where you can buy me coffee, buy me coffee, and of course, the YouTube thank you button again down below, and the Pony Club you can join as well. And of course, it was Wednesday yesterday, so there is a new Pony Club video for all the Patreon members and the Pony Club members as well. So let's go on into this. So this comes from RTE with the title of Britain has not managed to cope with Brexit despite civil service boost. So Britain has still not managed to cope with Brexit despite a huge increase in the size of the civil service, according to a new report. A study by the think tank UK and a Change in Europe has concluded that the British government does not have a coherent plan to deal with the European Union 8 years after the vote to leave. Shock horror. Why? Because They were obsessed with the idea, at least the Conservative government still obsessed is with the idea. We don't need to talk or interact with Europe at all. We can just exist and just ignore the European Union. You can't. It's there. It's not going anywhere. We have to interact with it, like it or not. We have to, acknowledge it and interact with it, and that just go to show you, um, the fact of it. And it wouldn't surprise me if Labour actually had to create a civil service department entirely dedicated just to maybe trying to sort of talk and negotiate with the EU. It's almost like we have to bring back the department for exiting the EU again. Except it wouldn't be exiting the EU, it would be probably the UK's EU department. There you go. Anyway, the report states that Brexit was a major factor in the hiring of over 100,000 extra civil servants since the referendum in 2016. This expansion was necessary to take over the functions and responsibilities from the EU. However, the report found that with changing ministers and political turbulence, the government has now failed to come up with a strategic vision for Brexit. Shock horror. Shock horror. Look, the sky is blue. Who knew? However, the report also found, so there are also frictions with this development, with also frictions with the devolved governments in Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland, which have also devised new policies from scratch. It claims that the new regulatory watchdogs are still struggling with a lack of resources, shock horror, and threats to their independence. Again, shock horror, because the Conservatives do not want any of these types of regulatory bodies, hence the whole dream of wanting to have the bonfire of regulations. These include the Office for Environmental Protection, the Food Standards Authority, the Trade Remedy Authority, the body which was set up to defend Britain against unfair competition. The report was also compiled for a series of reviews that figures inside and outside the government. Senior research fellow Jill Rutter said that the government had suffered a lack of direction. Again, tell us something we don't know. This vacuum means that the shape of the post-Brexit state is now only just beginning to actually emerge very piecemeal through the unconnected decisions, often forced by external constraints, the report said. The study also found that in important areas like chemicals, farm payments, and digital markets, the UK is now slowly moving much more slowly than the EU. Again, obviously, going to be a problem. We've talked about this before, that the EU is regulating much faster than we can actually keep up with. This is not just a problem with Parliament sort of passing bills, etc. It's the fact that you just don't have these bodies with enough resources to be able to look and see what they need to do on this. So, yeah, again, something that still needs to be done. Of course, let's finish this off. There are still issues with such as the status of the 2.8 million EU and EEA nationals. New farm payment scheme delays the implementation of the full checks at the British border authorities and the implementation of the new product standards marks. The report concludes that for the past 5 years, from the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson pledged to get Brexit done, whoever wins the next general election will still face a lot of unfinished business. Shock horror, I know. Yeah, again, shock horror. We're not finished with Brexit. Well, we've been saying this since day one. Because of the Conservative governments and the very sort of Brexit stance that they've taken, they've just refused to acknowledge. I mean, there was still that report that came out. I think it was, which I can't remember which one it was, but the EU actually came to talk to us about something, and then they told the department that they weren't going to speak to the EU until like 2022. Again, just this idea and imagination that we don't have to talk with the EU, that we don't have to imagine that they're there anymore. But no, they're there. You have to deal with them. You can't just ignore them. But again, this is the attitude that we have, and as we said, probably in the next parliament that we get, attitudes to the EU are going to change dramatically. I think you're going to see a lot more open discussions and talks about the damage that Brexit has done, because you're going to be able to have those conversations, because the Brexiteers have not wanted to have those conversations or have tried to actively shut down those types of conversations, even getting rid of committees dedicated to having a look at those particular types of problems. So Again, something we're going to have to heavily take a look at. But once again, pointing out the fact that most of these Brexiteers, these pro full market fundamentalists, continually harp on about the fact, oh my God, there's too many civil servants. Well, we're facing the problem. We haven't got enough civil servants because of all the extra stuff that we had to take over when we left the EU. So, anyway, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.